So I'm going to make what sounds like a very weird claim, but Prigozhin is Russia's closest thing to a reality show superstar like the Kardashians. And if you don't know who the Kardashians are, they made their name by being famous for being famous. They have a reality TV show where they fight and argue with each other, and somehow, for some reason, people want to watch it. I don't really understand it exactly. But Prigozhin is simply trying to stay relevant. And so here, Prigozhin says, jealous Kremlin has deliberately stopped Wagner from taking Bakhmut. Like, why would they do that? And it's unbelievable that he would make that claim. And that was just before they were able to complete taking Bakhmut a few weeks ago. Okay, another example. Now, if you look up Prigozhin and Google Trends and see how he trends up and down, he loves getting on video and getting his name out here. This is where he's taken Bakhmut, and he's all in, and he's trying to stay relevant again. And at least that's my thesis here. So if we look at, this is the FBI's most wanted list. He's not a good guy, but I've got to give him some credit for working really hard to stay relevant, and he's trying to stay relevant. These pictures should look familiar from the thumbnail. So let's hear what CNN has to say about him in this clip.
And today, the leader of the Wagner mercenary group fighting in eastern Ukraine, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said his group's next assignment may be in Russia, defending its territory. And in the latest, an ongoing public feud with Russian military officials, he asked Russian prosecutors to investigate whether senior defense officials committed a crime. Now,
so we already talked about the crime, and we're going to talk about infighting with the Russian military and with the Chechens, but he might be going to, what, Belgorod? That'll be really interesting to see if that plays out.
As you may know, Prigozhin has increased his criticism of Russian military leadership. He routinely now appears in these self-produced videos where he dresses up like one of his mercenary fighters and verbally attacks Russia's top generals. The question
and I want to amplify what Anderson Cooper just said here. He dresses up like one of these fighters. He's not doing the fighting on the front line. He is in Bakhmut when they're there with him, but he's not doing the fighting. He comes out for the pictures afterwards to publicize it.
What's his end game? CNN's Melissa Bell takes a look at the man behind the powerful mercenary group.
For months now, Yevgeny Prigozhin has been leading the charge in Ukraine and stealing the limelight.
Guys, don't bully the Russian military.
The taunt typical as he announced the withdrawal of his Wagner mercenaries last week after claiming the first Russian advance in Ukraine in months.
Okay, so that's where he is. Now, those images, you're going to see those same images. Combat Veteran Reacts was just talking about the same thing. Let me go back just a little bit. And he's talking about, like, man, he's great at theatrically staging his image. And
his
here we go.
Production capabilities. How he stage manages his public persona. And how important authenticity is to his public persona, right? I believe, it's the reason why it looks like a mega streamer like Valkyrie, right? She streams in what looks like her bedroom. It's not an accident, right? She could afford to have a mega super cool studio. But authenticity is an important part of connecting with people. And so Prigozhin is really trying to create that effect, that look of, this is authentic. Look, he's the boss of Wagner, and this supply truck just rolls right by him. It's not an accident.
So he's seen over here giving orders to the guys to the front and talking with them like, you know, they're all comrades and
so
whatever.
I want to point out,
but I want to make it clear, when Putin went to the front line, how many kilometers was he from the front line? He was so far from the front lines, it was laughable, like 80 kilometers or something crazy like that. It was about as far as he could be while still being within Ukraine. It was really quite a difference between how Prigozhin is casting himself and how Putin actually achieved it. Here is an article. Russia's Wagner Group chief threatens to pull his mercenary army from fighting in Ukraine if war efforts continue to be led by clowns who turn people into meat. So he's saying all this nonsense about the Russian Ministry of Defense while he ran his Wagner prisoners through a meat grinder himself. It was really interesting. And then they had another dust up here with Wagner captures the Russian commander as Prigozhin captures a Russian commander. I didn't misstate that. It wasn't a Ukrainian commander. The Russian commander with whom Prigozhin has had a feud. Why? Because, well, I'll read it. Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner group of mercenaries has captured a Russian commander as the notorious leader further escalates his feud with the regular army. Lieutenant Colonel Roman Veneventin, the commander of Russia's 72nd Brigade, tells an interrogator that while drunk, he had ordered his troops to fire on a Wagner convoy. Last week, Prigozhin accused the Russian army of trying to blow up his men as they were pulling back from the eastern town of Bakhmut. Another article, that was The Guardian. This is the same commentary in Radio Free Europe. This guy, the commander, apparently worked over some just prior to publishing the video of Wagner's press service released. Wait, they have a press service. Wagner's press service released a military report about a shootout between the mercenary group's fighters and the regular armed forces that allegedly took place on May 17th. And here's another story that goes with that same thing. Prigozhin posted a video of the interrogation of the captured lieutenant colonel of the Russian army. How could he do that? Well, he's not just fighting with the Russian army. He's also fighting with the Chechens. Like, this is a new one. So here's Anna from Ukraine talking about it. I'll let her speak to this for just a little bit to give you some background.
Old president of Chechnya. His father was also a president of Chechnya, and they are traitors. They switched to Russian side during Chechnya wars, Russian wars in Chechnya. And actually, his father was killed by Chechnya leaders who wanted independence from Russia. Now he is a pet of Putin, totally dependent on him. He is a leader of Chechnya for a really long period of time, and he is famous for his bad taste. He likes golden guns, he wears designer clothes with diamonds, and has lots of mansions. And he is like super obsessed with luxury brands and all of that. And somehow his army inherited a tradition of their leader. They are well dressed, well equipped, but rarely fight. That's why many people, especially those who are professional fighters like Wagner Group, who fought in Africa, who fought in many hot zones of the world, they mock Kadyrov's army. Kadyrov also filmed a couple of videos how they punish Ukrainians, and later it was revealed that these videos were filmed in Chechnya because they did not travel to Ukraine. It is quite dangerous here, you know. So to some extent, many people call this Kadyrov's army TikTok army. Why? Because they are popular on TikTok, and well, I don't know if there are many fans of TikTok. I'm not a fan of this social media. And this level of seriousness of Kadyrov's army to some extent reflects the TikTok style. But for a very long period of time inside Russia, they were creating legends of how strong Chechnya people are, and they are super fighters. And now Kadyrov's army, if they enter Ukraine, for example, we are dead, all of us dead. But of course, this is just an image because, you know, Russia claimed it's the second strongest army in the world, and turned out it's the second strongest army in Ukraine after Ukrainian armed forces. So now these two armies, Private Wagner Group and Kadyrov's army, have conflict. What happened? Well, people who rule inside Kadyrov's army recorded a video where they say that Prigozhin is totally wrong, recording all these videos, criticizing Russia, criticizing Russian military, and that this is a betrayal and he has to be punished for that, and so on and so forth. Prigozhin did not react personally, but the second man, actually the real leader, military leader of Wagner Group, Utkin, who is, by the way, all covered is in swastikas. If we are looking for Nazis, you know, they are in Russia. I also liked one joke. One subscriber told me, like, there are Nazis in Ukraine. These are Russian soldiers. And I am 100 in support of this statement. So this Utkin reacted, and in a very macho style that is so common for Russia. And he said that he's ready to come and fight with the army of Kadyrov, so Wagner Group against Kadyrov Group, to fight and see who is stronger.
Okay, so that's where they are. They're going to be locking horns on top of the Ministry of Defense. And then we see articles like this. Wagner Group will defend Belgorod region we just talked about. We see Vlad Vexler talking about like what's actually going on here. And he's conflicting with the Ministry of Defense. He's conflicting with Kadyrov. Is this intentional? Does Putin want this? Here's what Vlad has to say.
2 questions. For now, they will cover Putin's relationship with this behavior by Prigozhin. So the first question is, can Putin simply turn Prigozhin on and off like a tap? And I think the answer to that question, I suspect, is no. Second question is, are Mr. Prigozhin's outbursts directly or indirectly serving Mr. Putin's interests in a way that he himself recognizes? And I think the answer to that question is yes.
And I answered that question yes as well. I've talked about what Prigozhin's secret sauce, why he's allowed to get away with that here, and I talked about why he said what he said in the interview about the military and what he said about why he said what he said about the oligarchs here. We've not heard the last of Prigozhin. He's going to be continuing to be essentially the Kardashians of this very, very strange administration in Russia during this conflict. So I think that you're going to see more of Prigozhin, and he wants to be out there more because he wants to be out in front of the camera. He wants to be self-promoting. And as long as he's not, as long as he's doing Putin's bidding in that, and I'm not saying he's getting a text, Putin saying, say this. I'm saying as long as he's saying about what the boss wants him to say, he'll have free reign to do it. Okay, that's what I have to say about Prigozhin. I hope that helps you kind of understand where we are. If you want to check out this book, I Need Ammunition, Not a Ride, I wrote it during the first about 4 months of the war, up through Servodonetsk and Lysychansk. I was daily kind of copying everything down that was going on, and then I switched over to YouTube. So this faithfully goes through all the events of the war up through the first about 4 months. It's on Amazon Kindle, and if you have like the subscription service to that where you can get the free delivery and stuff, it's free if you do that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the coffees, the likes, the subscriptions. Thank you for caring about Ukraine.